Fab. So I think we'll make a start. So hello, my name is Malika. I'm from Success at School, and we're really excited to have Liverpool John Moores University joining us today. With Easter sort of round the corner, it's a perfect time to get a bit of a head start on all of your revision and make that Easter holiday count. So Katie is here to talk through her revision masterclass, which will talk you through revision tips, how to make a perfect revision timetable, and we will also be here to answer any questions that you do have. So please feel free to pop your questions in the chat at any point. A couple of you have asked if this will be shared after the webinar tonight, and this will be shared on our YouTube channel tomorrow morning, and you will all get an email with the link so you can rewatch it as many times as you like. But without much further ado, I'm going to pass it over to Katie, who can talk you through all of her revision tips, which is exactly what you guys are here for.
Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Katie. I am from Liverpool John Moores University. I'm a PhD student in English there. So I did my undergraduate and master's degrees in English as well. So I've been studying for a very long time and still studying. So over all of those years of studying, I've developed a lot of study skills and organisation skills that have kept me on track in order to hit the targets that I need to. I've also been teaching students at the university as well as a number of GCSE students in schools across Merseyside, helping them with their revision tips and study skills as well. So I've got all of this kind of experience and effective strategies for kind of organising my learning that I want to share with you in this session. To give you a kind of brief outline of what I'm going to kind of go over today, it's going to be about planning your revision, some tips for organising yourself really well, getting to grips with what it is you need to do and kind of beating that feeling of kind of being overwhelmed with kind of loads of exams and things coming up. Go through some tips for specific study skills, like, different memory strategies, thinking about what suits you and how you learn, so different styles of learning and revision as well. Thinking about the difference between active and passive learning, which is a really key kind of distinction to make sure that your revision is effective. And then kind of finish up by thinking about how to maintain good mental health during a kind of revision and study period, exam period. I'm going to be kind of touching on tips for that throughout this session. The main thing is that I'm going to run over a number of tips, and hopefully by the end of it, you'll have some ideas about how to better plan your revision using a number of different techniques to kind of keep you on track. So to start this off, I'm going to ask you all to answer a quick question. There's going to be a quick poll to see how you're feeling in general as you start this, whether you're student, parents, teachers, how confident do you feel in kind of planning your revision or in helping others plan your revision? I think that poll will go live shortly. You'll be able to see a number of options. Is that gone? Oh, let me have a look at the polls. Yeah, that looks live. That should pop up on your screen, and I'll give you a few minutes to kind of look over them. So do you feel extremely confident, somewhat confident, are you not sure, or not confident at all? I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to have a look and answer that, and then I'll have a look at the results. And can see that a good amount of you have managed to log a response to that poll. So the kind of we can close that poll now, and the most that people are saying is kind of somewhat confident, so that's good. 3% of you are extremely confident, 22% of you kind of not very confident, not sure, and a smaller percentage of you not confident at all. Most of you somewhat confident, so that's a good place for us to start, really. Hopefully by the end of this, if you're not very confident, you'll have some tips to help you feel more confident, and if you're kind of somewhat confident, I can push some of you into extremely confident, into how to go about starting to plan for this revision that you've got to do. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is just give you a brief overview of kind of key tips, and then I'm going to get into a bit more detail into how you can kind of start to achieve these things. So the earlier you start your kind of planning and revision, the better. I know it's kind of just before Easter now and a few weeks off school before you go back, so this is a really good time, if you haven't already got a good plan in place, to kind of really dig in and get that set up. It's never too late to do that as well. Like if you feel overwhelmed and you haven't kind of feel like you've got a grasp on it, don't worry, it can happen from now. You're all here today. This is a brilliant start to that. The more you kind of put things off, that kind of looms over you, it feels stressful. So I'm going to help you today to kind of get organized, break down all of those kind of overwhelming tasks into smaller, more manageable chunks. The more specific that you can be about the kind of task you're going to do, the better. So rather than saying, right, I've got a whole day free, I'm going to revise English, you might say, right, I've got an hour and I'm going to revise the key themes of Romeo and Juliet. You see how that is a smaller and more achievable and less overwhelming task than I'm going to spend all day revising all of my English. Breaking it down into small manageable chunks actually helps you to be more in control and more efficient with the things that you want to revise. And the key thing too is to have a timetable, and a timetable that works for you. So let's get into kind of how you go about setting yourself up something that has those kind of smaller, more manageable chunks in place so that your revision can be more efficient and more effective. So you'll notice that I haven't just called this creating a timetable, I've called it creating a realistic timetable, and that's a really key difference. And what I mean by that is that your revision timetable shouldn't hold you back, it should work for you, it should really help you to kind of do the things that you need to do. Like I was saying about having a specific and manageable task, if you set yourself too much to do at once, it quickly kind of goes out the window and you feel like you're not achieving anything, and you just get into this endless cycle of feeling stressed. So it can take a bit of trial and error to get the right balance and the right kind of timetable to work for you, and I'm going to kind of give you some ideas of how you might go about kind of doing that. But the kind of two key places to start, I'm summarizing as work out what you need to do and work out how much time you have to do it. They're very simple things, so I'm going to go into some tips for breaking down how you kind of plan for both of those things. And the first part of it might feel a little silly, it's pretty straightforward. You know the exams that you're going to do, you already have an idea of that in your head, but if you can kind of write that down, make a list somewhere, whether that's on paper, if it's on a notes app on your phone, if it's on a Word document, if you can write down a list of all of the exams that you've got coming up, seeing it in paper can kind of be the first step of removing that kind of overwhelming burden of it all in your head. So just make a list of the subjects that you're going to be examined on, and then to get a little bit more specific, can you list the requirements of that paper? So do you have past papers that you've looked at already? Do you know the different topic areas that you're going to have to cover? That helps you to be a bit more specific in your planning. And then can you assess for yourself the subjects and topics that you feel most confident in already, right? So you can prioritize the more important subjects and tasks in kind of making your timetable, right? Prioritizing will make a huge difference to having a realistic and effective timetable, because you'll be able to kind of organize yourself around what you feel needs the most attention. So let's have a look at an example of what I'm talking about, right? I've done this based on the GCSE subjects that I did, how I really did feel about them at the time. Whatever stage of your study that you're at, this will look different, and however you want to do this is different too. It doesn't have to be using this exact same system, but if you have some way of kind of writing down all the subjects you're doing and how you feel about them in general, that's the first step to kind of starting to get to grips with how you're going to plan your revision. So you'll see for me, the subjects that I felt really confident in were my English subjects and art. I felt approaching my exams, I had a good handle on all of the things I needed to do for those exams. I felt confident that I could go into those exams knowing what I was going to do. I felt not as confident in Spanish and geography. Some subjects of Spanish I was okay on, different parts of the exam, not so much. The oral exam was difficult, and geography as well, unsure. And then maths and science was where I really struggled. I didn't feel like I had a good grasp on what I needed to do for my maths exams, and science was a mixed bag. Biology, okay, the other subjects, not so much. So that would be my first stage, right? Just being really honest with myself about how prepared I felt for the exams in different subjects. Okay, then I'm going to start to get a little bit more specific, right? On the other side, you can see I'm listing particular topics, the ones even from the subjects I feel confident in, right? Even if you feel confident, it's important to keep up that revision as well. But I know that maths, I want to revise everything pretty much, but I start naming some key areas, some key topics. The same for physics, chemistry, biology, those key topics that I've looked over, and I know that I need to spend some time revising them because I'm struggling and I don't feel like I could go into an exam confident that I can tackle them. So that's my first stage. After that, I'm going to start organizing that list a bit more, right? Organizing into the key topics, and being as specific as I can about the topics that I need to tackle. So not just maths in general, but fractions and algebra, right? Not just geography, but resource management, etc. Things like that. So in order to kind of get to grips with what you need to do, you want to be as specific as you can, and you want to start to prioritize them by how confident you feel, how prepared you feel for those subjects. And once you've done that, however you want to do it, scribbling everything down, the next thing to do is to work out how much time you have to actually do this revision. Okay, you're going to start maybe with having a calendar up or having a list of the dates of the exams themselves, and you're going to work backwards from there. So you've got the dates for the exams, and you're going to make sure that you factor in other things as well. You're going to make sure that you factor in when you're going to be in school, when you might have work, when you might have free time, social commitments, family events. All of these things matter to kind of plotting out how you can kind of fit in your revision. It's important that you make this timetable work for you, that you fit it around your actual life. Okay, no one is able to kind of non-stop revise between now and the exams, right? Other things have to happen, right? Other things are going on, and you need to take some time to rest as well. So look over that list that you've already made and compare it to the dates of the exams, and see if you can figure out those priorities, right? What is it, based on the timing of the exam and your confidence in the subject, that you're going to have to prioritize? Okay, a quick stop for a question now. Just add into the chat if you want to. Which subject or subjects do you feel the most and least confident revising for now? So take a minute, think about how you would go about writing that list of priorities. Which are the ones that you feel you're really confident in, and which are the ones that you think, right, these are the ones that for me that I need to prioritize now? So just add to the chat if you'd like. I can't see anything popping up in the chat. I think that seems to be disabled for me. Hopefully it's not for you guys. Maybe someone could just have a look at the chat for me, or maybe there's just no one wants to add anything at this point, which is fine. Just after the meeting at some point, or during the session, you can have a little think for yourselves about those subjects that you feel the most and least confident in, and you can start to kind of make your list of priorities for yourself. Okay.
Hey,
So once
Katie,
you've done
we've got a lot of there's a lot of English, biology, physics, maths. They're in the chat section.
Yeah, my chat seems to be saying it's only available during the meeting. I think I've been locked out of the chat, maybe.
Right.
So, but good people are.
Yeah. There's a good engagement here.
Yeah. Okay. Good. If anyone can have a look at the chat for me so I can see it, but that's fine. I will come back at the end of the meeting and kind of get into that chat. I think something's come up in there. Q&A. Yeah, so a few other people have said in the Q&A that the chat's not working for them. Okay, we'll have a look at that. I'll carry on and I will come back to that in a minute. But good to see that a few of you are kind of engaging, that there is different subjects that you're all looking at. So keep a note of that for yourself and start to do that kind of listing of your priorities. And what I'm going to move on to now is, once you've got that list, how are you going to go about taking all of that information, knowing when the exams are, knowing what you need to have a look at, turning it into a realistic timetable for you, okay? And there are lots of different ways you might do this, okay? I'm going to give you some suggestions. The important thing is that you choose one that works for you. So you might spend hours of your time, hand crafting a really beautiful, huge timetable that you put on your wall. But if you're not going to actually look at that, if you're not actually going to use it, then it's just a waste of time. So if you're going to use the calendar on your phone more often, if you're going to use the calendar, in the family calendar that's up in the kitchen, if you're going to use a Word document on your computer, then that's fine too. Or if you're going to use scrap bits of paper that you change up every week, that's fine. The point is that you make something that's efficient and useful for you. So think about what kind of timetable is actually going to work for you, right? Whether it's a physical one that you make, whether it's digital, whether it's color coded. As tempting as it might be to kind of get a load of craft materials and make it look really beautiful, if that's not going to actually help you to organize yourself, then don't waste that time. Start with those things that you already know, right? When you're in school, when you've got hobbies, when you've got social plans, block out time to revise, considering for yourself when it is that you work best. Okay, so if you know that when you get home from school, you're full of energy, that's a good time for you to be able to focus, then block out a bit of time then. If you're the sort of person who comes home from school or work and is tired, needs a break, then set a break time then, right? Don't force yourself to work in the times that you know you're not going to be that efficient in. If you need to take a break, make sure you take those breaks. If you need to have a snack before you can, get back into doing something new, do that as well. You can see from the example on here that I've put up, the kind of handwritten one, very simple. The student who's made this has blocked out in brown here loads of free time for themselves in the week, right? A whole Sunday off, not that much revision on a Saturday, plenty of time for rest throughout the week as well. And I'm going to kind of emphasize the importance of that a few times throughout this session, but a lot of people think that once you're in revision mode, once you're in that build up to exams, the best approach is to revise all day, every day, right? And I'm going to come back to that a few times to tell you that that's not a useful approach, right? Not only in general, but it's actually kind of research proven not to be the most effective approach. So trying to plan for the things you've already got going on, for the breaks that you need to take, is really important. Here's an example of the kind of timetable that I would set up for myself, based on what I know about when I work the best, based on the priorities that I need to make, in terms of subjects that I need the most work on. So say I would block out when I was in school. I know after a long day of concentrating, I'm not good at just switching on to something else. So every day I would need to have a break and a snack immediately when I get home, switch off for a bit. And then I'm plotting in, different tasks depending on what's going on in that day. If I've got a busy evening on Mondays, I know I'm not going to have loads of time or loads of kind of mental energy left. So I'm going to do something like a creative writing prompt. That's a subject I feel confident in, English language. So I'm going to do something to keep up those skills, but that I know is not going to be that taxing for me. The days when I have less going on is when I'm going to tackle those subjects, in maths and science that I struggle with a bit more. I'm going to make sure that I've got, plenty of rest, plenty of space and energy to tackle the things that I struggle with the most, that I need to prioritize because the exams are first. I'm going to make sure I factor in the right time for me to do them. And however is best for you to do that, you can kind of figure out in terms of what you feel you need to prioritize. But I really do stress the importance of being realistic, planning when you can actually work and how you best work. So these are kind of a run through of those kind of tips, right? Break down the tasks into weekly goals. So there's an exam coming up. This week I need to make sure I focus on, a few of those math skills, and then look at individual days as well. Today I've got time for maybe an hour's revision. The next day I've got time for 2 or 3, break it down like that. Go with what works best for you, both in terms of the times of day you can work, the days of the week you can work, and kind of timetable that's actually going to be useful. Be realistic about it, be flexible. Sometimes you might have set yourself 3 hours revision one day, but then something comes up, you get ill, you get distracted. Don't be hard on yourself with that stuff. Realize that you need to make some adjustments. You need to look at that timetable again. Be realistic and be flexible about what's actually going to be able to be possible, and look after yourself, right? That rest time is really important. Make sure you have got time to, have downtime, see your friends. The students who don't, shut out everything else while they're revising tend to just do better generally, right? You'll come out of it feeling much better because you'll have kept up your normal life as much as you can as well. Don't feel like you have to shut everything else down just because it's revision time. You want to get a better balance of that throughout your kind of revision and exam period. Otherwise it's too much, it's too stressful. No one needs to be that overworked. Okay, we've got another poll now, so I want to know, before I kind of give you some of my tips on revision techniques and kind of different things you can do as memory strategies, I want to know what techniques you already use. So there are a few that will come up on the poll. So mind maps, flashcards, watching videos, making notes, reading over notes or textbooks. And if there's anything else, put it in the chat. And someone else might have to read some chat things out for me because it seems not to be working. But I'll give you a minute to kind of add some things to that poll, and then I'll have a look at them. And then if someone can kind of read out what's come up in the chat as well, if there's any different ideas, I'd love to know what it is you're already doing in terms of revision, what things you find useful. Quite a good balance of people using the techniques that have put up there. Flashcards,
Yes,
videos, notes.
There's a tie between making notes and reading notes. So we've got 22% each. And then we've got about 21% watches videos, 21% flashcard, and 12% mind maps.
Okay, but less people doing mind maps. Does anyone put anything extra in the chat at all?
We've got crib sheets, spaced revision, past papers. There's quite a lot of past papers.
Brilliant. Okay, good.
Some people mention writing on whiteboards. Yeah, the majority is past papers.
Yeah, sounds good. That's really good. I'm going to come back to kind of past papers and how they might be useful a bit later. But yeah, good to see that you use a range of those techniques as well. Writing on whiteboards sounds like a really good one. Good to kind of visualize all that information. Right, and one more quick poll before I give you them. How effective are the current techniques that you use at helping you remember what it is you need to for those exams? So do you feel that the techniques you're already using are effective or not effective, or you're not really sure? I can already see that I've got 24% of you saying very effective, most of you, 66%, saying somewhat, and a few kind of not sure. Okay, somewhat effective is good, right? So I'm going to talk you through kind of some other techniques I've got and maybe how you might kind of boost that. So rather than having a technique that is kind of, you know, useful sometimes but not others, how you can use a kind of range of techniques to kind of make your revision even more effective. You know, how you can kind of alter things for yourself so that you can go into all these different kinds of exams with a good strategy for tackling the information you need to. Okay, I'm going to start with memory strategies. Okay, so when you have a lot of information that you need to retain, it's useful to try out different techniques in order to kind of more effectively retain what you need to. So I've included some links here to some really useful sources that have loads of different kind of techniques. So if you're looking for some new ones, aside from the ones I'm going to mention to you today, it's worth looking at those links. I do believe the slides will be shared with you as well as this kind of recording. So have a look at those links, work through a few different techniques, you know, try out some new ones just to see if they work for you or not. So loads of resources on that, even beyond the ones I've suggested for you here. But what I found when I was kind of looking through all these resources, like looking over the research for kind of what effective memory techniques are, all of the research kind of reiterates a few key points, right? That working little and often is key. So that's why I was saying in your, you know, your timetable, block out shorter periods of time with specific tasks, right? Make sure you've got rest. Don't overload yourself. Research shows that actually working in those smaller chunks, so you don't tire out your brain, is really effective. If you just overload yourself and get tired, your brain actually finds it harder to retain that information. So little and often, right? Engage with the information. And I'm going to come back to this a little bit more about what it means to actively learn and what it means to passively look at information. I'm going to come back to that one. Variety, right? Use a variety of techniques. That's why I'm giving you these links, why I'm going to mention a few different things. Hopefully using more than one technique, so not just using flashcards for everything and not just doing mind maps, not just reading, not just watching, you know, using a variety of things for different subjects gives your brain something new to focus on, right? You might know that if you sit in one place all day, you might find towards the end of the day, you're finding it harder to concentrate, right? That's because your brain wants something new to focus on. It gets tired out, you know, looking at the same thing over and over again, being in the same place. So being able to kind of switch it up, give it something new to focus on, will help you to retain that information. Take breaks. Okay, I've said that a few times and I'll say it a few more times in this session. Rest is really important, not just for your kind of mental health, as I will talk about a bit later on, but just for your kind of physical health as well. Your brain can't just take in information, you know, endlessly. It does need a break to absorb the information that you've given it. You'll be able to retain things much better if you work a little bit, take a rest, come back to it, you know, take a rest. Your brain actually will fare better. You'll remember things better if you do take those breaks. And then review what you've learned. That's really important too, right? Don't just think you can do one session, revise a topic, then you're done, and you move on to the next one, right? You might move on to the next one, but you're going to have to come back to what you revised. You're going to have to come back to that topic, review that information, test yourself, make sure that it has actually stuck in. You know, depending on how you work and how you feel about different subjects and how you best learn, you know, different subjects will be easier for you to take in than other ones, right? So that reviewing is really important to that kind of memory, okay? So I'm going to give you a couple of memory techniques, really simple ones, that the kinds of things you might have used already, or if you haven't, you might find they're useful for certain topics, certain subjects. So mnemonics is one of them. You can kind of use a mnemonic to create your own sort of story or associations with information that you find kind of difficult to recall, right? These are really good for, you know, memorizing, you know, short bits of kind of science topics or equations, things like that. You can kind of play around them in different ways. You can make up stories to remember a sequence of information. You can kind of picture facts as locations on a map. There's loads of different ways you can do it. The most simple way is this kind of thing that you might have seen before. So this is a topic from GCSE chemistry, right? Oxidation and reduction. So this is the sort of information that some people will be really good at just memorizing, retaining. Others, like me, for example, I struggled with this kind of memory recall. So a mnemonic like this would really help me. So I'm going to summarize it as oil rig, right? So every letter of oil rig is associated with one part of this information. So oil, oxidation, is loss of electrons, and rig, reduction, is gain of electrons. So if I wanted to learn that, I'd write that down, say it over to myself a few times, right? Oil, oxidation is loss of electrons, reduction is gain of electrons, rig. So I would just kind of have that in my mind, and if I needed it in an exam, because I've gone over that and reviewed it, that might help me to remember information like that. So that takes a bit of creativity. If you've got certain things, if you can make a mnemonic of it, or if you can make a kind of story out of the things, out of like the first letters of loads of information, then that can be really useful. Another thing is memory places, or they're sometimes called memory palaces. So this is a technique that uses your kind of spatial memory as well to kind of learn a sequence of information. So rather than just having those kind of letters, words that help you to associate things, you have a kind of sequence of things that you move around, a place that you know well. So to give you an example, I did this in my office. So right, there are 4 bits of information that I need to remember in order to answer this question, right? It's a geography topic. How can urban areas become more sustainable, right? There are 4 key things: water conservation, energy conservation, waste recycling, and creating green spaces. And within that, those topics, there's kind of key information, right? It's a lot of stuff to try and take in. And I, instead of just reading that and trying to remember it, I created this memory place. So I associated each topic with a place in the room, right? With the door, the desk, the window, and the shelf. So on the door, I put my post-it note with my key things for water conservation. And the way that I go about kind of remembering this is I will get up, I will stand by the door, I will read that information out to myself, right? Water conservation, right? The key things are dual flushing toilets in businesses and homes, and collecting rainwater for gardens and water meters, right? I will stand by the door, I will read that to myself a couple of times, and then I will move on. I'll go and stand by the desk. I'll have a similar thing. I'll have my notes on energy conservation at the desk. I'll say, right, I'm at the desk, I read these notes, and I do that, and I move around the room, saying out loud that information to myself, right? And it sounds a bit mad, and you might feel a bit silly doing it. But if you're someone who's kind of struggling to kind of memorize information like this, maybe it's not your favorite subject, maybe just you're reading it and it's not going in, you're not able to recall it, getting up and moving, saying information out loud. These are things that are kind of giving your brain that chance to have variety, of have a change, add a bit of movement in. You could do this in a number of different ways, right? You could do it in different rooms around the house. Maybe the living room is where you're revising maths. So, tell the family to get involved as well. You've got, different information on the sofa, you've got different information on a window. I did this kind of thing all the time when I was doing my GCSEs. I had, mirror information. So I had like a series of notes on my mirror, and I would go over them, and then I would take the written notes away. I would stand by the mirror, see if I could recall that. It's about that reviewing, repetition, seeing what I can take in. If this technique doesn't work, if you try it, if it's just not working, then you scrap it, you try something else, okay? It's about kind of giving yourself a chance to introduce a bit of variety. Not everything is going to work for everyone, and not every technique is going to work for, every subject. It's about a bit of trial and error. But if you're feeling bogged down, if you're getting bored of just sitting, reading information over and over again, as most of us would, introducing a few little things like this can kind of really help you to shake things up, give your brain that bit of variety that it might need. So here you go, I'll test you on this. Type in the chat if you can remember what oil rig stands for. Someone might have to tell me if people are bringing that up as well. Is anyone able to remember that?
Yeah, we've had quite a few answers so far. They all seem to be correct. But quite a few people actually.
Oh, that's good. Well, that might be that I've got chemistry experts in the chat already, or it might be that technique works. But either way, that it, something very simple like that can be very effective. So if you've got kind of information like that that's kind of difficult for you to remember, then try a technique like that. Try the memory kind of places, try some different things and go back to those links, have a look over them and see if you can kind of find new ways to kind of take in lots of different information for yourself. We went over kind of mnemonics, memory places, mind maps. A few of you kind of used the mind maps. I always found quite useful for kind of English topics. If you're trying to remember the different themes of a text, the themes in Romeo and Juliet, for example, you can kind of, writing those down, making links between different characters, different scenes that you need to remember, making note cards or flashcards, teaching the information to someone else. Like I say, have those notes up around your house, get people involved, work with your friends, have study groups, see if you can test each other. That's all part of that kind of reviewing information. And I know a few of you said you use past papers already. That's a really good way as well to get to grips with what the requirements of that exam is going to be. Test your ability to kind of recall that information, to kind of fit the information to the kinds of questions that you're going to get. And depending on, like I said, not every kind of technique or strategy is going to work for everyone or every subject. And you want to think about what kind of learning techniques work best for you, right? There are different learning styles you might have heard of. So you might be more a visual learner, you might be more an auditory learner, wanting to hear information. You might be more a kinesthetic learner, you might be kind of moving around, in that kind of memory places thing. Having a change of scene might really work for you as well. The research on this shows that actually most people are a combination of all these things, right? Some people might lean more towards kind of visual techniques, but most people find a combination or a variety of these different kind of styles really useful to their learning, right? So if you're a visual learner, you might want kind of posters, colourful charts, mind maps. You might want to kind of colour code your note cards and flashcards. So you've got, a colour for English, a colour for maths, or different colours for different topics. That might help you. If you're more kinesthetic, you might want to move around, do those memory places. You don't want to record, on your phone, some notes for yourself and listen to them when you go for a walk, listen to them when you're doing jobs around the house. Washing up, cooking, all of that stuff is really useful. Going for a walk, listening to things. It's good for your body and your brain as well to have that change of scene. And if you're an auditory learner, you might do that too. You might listen to recordings of stuff. You might ask someone to repeat information to you. You might have different music on in the background when you are kind of doing different subjects. And, some people find noise, music or sounds really distracting and they want silence. Some people actually find a bit of a background buzz helpful. So it's about experimenting, right? Trying to do a combination of different techniques, different styles for different subjects, seeing what works for you, right? Not everything is going to work, but if you can switch it up a bit, give yourself that variety, your revision will be all that more effective because you're keeping your mind engaged in different things. So if you're currently just using one technique for everything and you're finding that kind of okay, somewhat useful, but not entirely effective, try and introduce a few different things, right? You don't have to do everything, but maybe just you take one subject that you're particularly struggling with and you try a couple of different techniques this week and you see if any of them seem to be helping you recall that information a little bit better. A bit of trial and error and seeing how that goes. So I said earlier that some activities, some techniques are going to help you to actively learn and some are not going to be as effective, right? That's about using, actually engaging with the information that's in front of you. So your revision is going to be much more effective if you are actively learning, right? Actively learning means that you are fully engaged with that information, right? You're using different techniques that are actually making your brain kind of make connections, really think about the material that you're trying to take in. Passive learning, for example, just reading over a worksheet and doing nothing else with it, that kind of thing is going to make it less likely that you'll retain the information, right? You need a clear goal for the work that you're doing. So if you say, I'm going to read this worksheet because I want to understand X, Y, and Z by the end of it, then that's already makes that more active style of learning. So I'm going to quickly whiz through these. You can start to put an A for active or a P for passive in the chat if you'd like to. But I don't want us to run out of time for questions, so I might just go over these quickly, but I want to highlight that different kinds of learning style are active and different are passive. So highlighting phrases and words in texts, are they active or passive? Mind mapping, doing past papers, copying notes on your computer. Do you think, any of these are active? Do you think any of these are passive? While having a think of that, I'm going to just start giving the answers so I can get to thinking about your questions as well. So highlighting phrases and words as you're reading is a passive technique. And the reason it's passive is that if you're highlighting information, you are recognizing that it's important, but you're not actually thinking about what's important. If, for example, you highlight a phrase, highlight a word, and then make notes about it, or then add it into a mind map, or then put it into a flashcard and think, summarize it for yourself, that makes it an active kind of style of learning, because then you are using your brain to translate that information into kind of memorable kind of nuggets of things to remember, right? So don't just read, don't just highlight, add notes as well. Mind mapping is active because you are making connections, making ideas explicit between the information. You're giving your brain a sort of map, a way back to different kinds of information. Doing past papers is active because that makes you think about how you can kind of reshape your answers, how you can fit the knowledge you have into a blueprint that's going to be useful. And just copying notes on your computer is passive, right? you're going to just be taking time if you're just putting information from one place to another. Same with just kind of copying word for word information out of the textbook. You want to be able to summarize that to make that an active technique, right? Annotating text, as I said, then you're kind of engaging with the text, bringing your own ideas. If you can summarize information in your own words, that's active. If you can get that information, boil it down to just the key points. And repeating information out loud for yourself, right? That works where kind of just copying word for word doesn't. Because if you skim read something, your brain kind of takes in bits of the information and it misses some if you skim it. If you sit and you get a piece of paper and you read out loud everything that's on that, everything that's in the book, everything that's on the screen, you are focusing on every word in more detail. That makes that more active. That makes you really concentrate on what's going on. So that's good for a lot of reasons. Right, I will leave you with a couple of brief points that learning revision techniques now is going to be helpful, not just because it kind of will help you improve your revision, help you improve your exams, but because all of these things are kind of going to help you in the long term as well, right? If you can learn to plan, set yourself clear goals, if you can monitor, review the things that you are doing, self-test, you do those past papers and then evaluate yourself, review how well you've done, identify where you need to improve. All of those three kind of skills are things that you're going to need in further study, of things that you're going to need in your day-to-day life and any job that you do in the future. So actually the kind of organization, planning, carrying out of tasks, thinking about how you best work and how you best learn is useful in the short term for revision, but these are skills that are going to be useful to you over and over again in your life. So the sooner you start to kind of engage with and take control of your own learning, the better that's going to be for you in general. And there's some links on there that you can do as well. Okay, final poll, and then it is going to be time for any of your questions. So I want to know how many times a week you do a self-care activity, right? So that can be any action, right, that you do to just look after yourself, improve your health, your well-being, your happiness. So it could be, making sure you stop for a lunch break. It could be, catching up with friends, watching your TV show that you love. How often a week are you, specifically setting aside time for your self-care, right? Every day, every other day, rarely. That's looking good from the responses so far. I've got plenty of people doing that daily or 2 to 3 times a week. But a good number of you there doing that rarely or, once a week. This might feel like an odd thing to throw in at the end of a revision skills session, but as I've been saying, those breaks that you take, that rest that you have in between sessions is really, really important, right? There are a lot of resources online that I've given you here that help you with tips and give you an indication of places you can go if you feel, particularly stressed or that you're struggling during your revision and exam period. Don't struggle on your own. Do seek help that you need if you're struggling. In a more general sense as well, even if you're not really struggling, it's so easy in periods of kind of high pressure when you've got a lot to do to kind of forget about getting enough sleep, to forget about eating proper meals, to think about, to forget about taking breaks because you think, well, I've got 4 weeks till this exam. I need to be working on this all the time, every day, and as I've said, that can be very counterproductive, actually. Making sure that you've got time for rest, that you organize yourself, and working shorter breaks actually is going to make the things you need to remember, the work you need to do, much more efficient, much more effective. So do try and find that balance as you make that timetable for yourself, as you factor in, what it is that you need to work on. you know, keep up with your friends, keep up with your family, you know, have that downtime. Don't give up the hobbies and things that you enjoy. Um, you know, stay organized, work in short bursts. You know, I use that technique sometimes, the Pomodoro technique, where I kind of set a 25-minute timer. I just focus on a task for that 25 minutes. Then I take a break no matter what I'm doing. And I repeat that a few times. That is much more effective for me than kind of sitting down and going, right, 5 hours work, I'll just switch off in that time. So, you know, getting a change of scene, having a short amount of time to focus on a specific task, asking for help if you need it, and making sure you factor in time for basic things, sleeping, eating, resting, but also those extra things that are going to be relaxing for you, that are going to help you. I can't emphasize that enough. You know, when you do that timetable, you know, timetable that stuff for yourself as well, even if you feel you shouldn't really be doing it. That rest is just as important as the revision time. You know, one task at a time, know your limits, have a change of scene, check in with support networks around you, take a break. You know, here's my little kind of collage of images to really drive that home for you. You know, that rest and relaxation is really important at all times, but especially at times of increased stress and increased responsibility. So here's the key points of this. You know, take control and organize your revision now. Be realistic about it, be flexible, rest, and review, you know, not only the particular revision you're doing and the techniques you're using, but the way that you're organizing that as well. You know, adapt it in the ways that you need, and do the things that work for you most. Okay, that is the end of the information I have. We can, if you have questions about anything I've said, or want me to clarify anything, or you have any other questions, or you want to share any of your ideas, top tips for revision and getting a rest, then please do that in the chat. I'm going to have to ask you to read them out to me as they come in, because I can't see them. Yeah.
Don't worry. So we've got a couple of questions. We've only got about 5 minutes or so. So the first main question that's cropped up a couple of times is about motivation. How do you find that motivation? How do you keep that motivation going? And just tips about motivation in general.
Yeah, it's a really good point. I think it is difficult when you have loads of exams, and maybe it's loads of subjects that you've been worn out on. You know, you're tired of thinking about them, you don't want to do the exams, the subject's not that interesting to you anymore. I think motivation can be the wrong thing to focus on, because it's easy to let yourself go, well, I don't have the motivation today, so I'm not going to do it. But what if you never have the motivation, right? I hated maths and I hated science. I never wanted to do them. If I had left it down to motivation, I wouldn't have done it at all. So I think it's about that, taking control, organizing a timetable, saying to yourself, look, I'm going to just do half an hour on this topic today. That's all I need to do. If you've done that, that's more than nothing, right? And that is something that you can tick off. So I think, rather than getting caught up on motivation, especially if you really feel you're lacking it, it is just about trying to say to yourself, look, these are the things I am going to have to do. I am going to have to do this exam. I am going to have to look at these topics. So break it down into as small a chunk as possible, and do that little and often. You know, you will find, you know, just setting yourself those really small tasks, you'll at least get something done, and you'll have a sense of achievement after that, right? I think that helps too, rather than going, I'm not motivated, I've not done anything, then you feel bad, and then you struggle to get going again. You've gone, I don't want to do it, I will do half an hour. You do half an hour, you think, good, now I can do something else.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think that works hand in hand with another question we got, which was sort of how do you manage procrastination? I remember when I was doing my exams, I would always think the quicker I start, the quicker it's done. And that's just saying that, as silly as it sounds, kind of helped me get into the mindset of I'm just going to start it now so that it's done sooner, and break it down into that Pomodoro technique, which was about 25 minutes on, that 5 minutes off. And in that 5 minutes off, always giving myself a chocolate bar as well as a reward. I think little things like that are just so important, and you just got to keep going, keep chipping away, slow and steady. And then another little question that we got was to do with being a visual or auditory, whatever type of learner you are. How do you actually figure that out? How do you know which is the best for you?
I think it's a bit of trial and error. So think about the techniques you're already using, right? Say a bit of information, find a bit of information that you feel, you know, not as confident on as everything else, right? See if you can do, choose a few different techniques and think about working on, choose one visual technique, right? Do a mind map of the information, then maybe record the information for yourself and walk around listening to it. Try a few different things and see if you can compare how well they help you remember. And like I said, I think a combination of those techniques is what's going to be useful overall, but try different topics and different techniques out, and just a bit of trial and error, I think. See what works in different subjects and see what doesn't.
I'm very sorry, I just got kicked out of the meeting for no apparent reason. Fab, we've got time for probably one more question. And another question that we did have is, how do you know if you are making good revision notes? How do you know if the technique is sort of working? I'm a bit confused if I'm writing too much or too little. How do I know when I've covered the most important points?
Yeah, that's a really good question, actually. And I think that is part of that reviewing and adapting your techniques, right? So what I would do is if you've got a set of notes for your subjects, I would try a past paper. I would then kind of, if you can you can usually get hold of the mark schemes as well. I would, compare your answers to the mark schemes and see how well it is you think you're doing on those past papers. That might be a good way and for you to then think, right, I'm losing marks, I think, on this section, and maybe that's where my notes or my techniques need to be, changed a bit. Or if you go, right, I think I'm doing well in all of these areas, then you'll know that the techniques and the notes you're taking are good. I think it's about testing yourself, and maybe trying, getting other people to see if you can recall that information, getting people to test you, seeing if you can actually recall that information well enough. I think it's trying some of those different techniques. You might find, that your notes are working or not working.
Fab. So I think that's pretty much all we've got time for. We've got quite a few people already saying bye in the chat, but I do know that there's a couple of questions that we didn't get down to answering today. But what I will do is send it over to the team at Liverpool John Moores and be sure to get you guys the answers as soon as I can. Thank you to everyone in the chat. You guys have all been helping each other in terms of the best revision techniques, good websites to use, and it's been a really, really engaging session. And thank you so much to Katie and Mariam and the team at Liverpool John Moores for doing this. It's been really, really valuable to everyone. And like I said, this will be uploaded tomorrow morning on our YouTube channel, and you will have the link to that recording in your email as well tomorrow. But thank you guys once again. All the best with your upcoming exams. We really, really hope you enjoyed the session and have a lovely evening. Thank you guys. Bye bye.
Thanks. Bye. Good luck, everyone.